This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
Marcus came of a line of soldiers. The official came of a line of officials. Neither of them had a shred of understanding for each other's ideas, and they had both been thankful when Marcus was 18 and could apply for a centurion's commission. He had asked to be sent to Britain, though it meant starting in an auxiliary cohort instead of a line of battle one, partly because his father's elder brother had settled there when his own years of soldiering were done, but mostly because if ever anything became known of the Lost Legion, it would be known first in Britain, and it might even be that he would find out something for himself. Thinking about his father, he remembered vividly that last leave of all. His father had just been appointed to command the first cohort of the Hispana, which meant having charge of the Eagle and being something very like second in command of the Legion beside. But his mother had been faintly anxious, almost as if she knew. "If it was any other Legion," she had said, "you've told me yourself that the Hispana has a bad name." And his father had replied, "I held my first command in the Hispana." He turned to his small son, laughing. "Presently it'll be your turn. It has fallen on evil days, but we will make a Legion of the Hispana yet, you and I." Looking back across the years, Marcus remembered that his father's eyes had been very bright, like the eyes of a man going into action, and the light had caught suddenly in the great flawed emerald of the signet ring he always wore, striking from it a spark of clear green fire. Odd how one remembered things like that, little things that somehow mattered. Tramp, tramp, tramp came the sound of the cohort's feet behind him. It would be pleasant, Marcus thought, if Uncle Aquila was like his father. He had not met his uncle yet. One could become a camp commandant, as Uncle Aquila had done, or one could go on by way of the Praetorian Guard to try for command of a legion, and an Egyptian legion had been Marcus's shining goal for as long as he could remember. But one day he would go home to the Etruscan hills and buy back the old farm which the plump official had ruthlessly sold to defray expenses. For a moment he remembered almost painfully the wild olive tree in the loop of the stream, on a twisted root of which he had once found a kind of gall growing, shaped something like a little bird. He'd spent much loving care trimming and carving feathers on it. He had that little bird still. The road topped a gentle rise, and suddenly Isca dum Noniorum lay before them, with the fortress-crowned red mount, dark with shadows against the evening sky, and Marcus came back to the present with a jerk. The farm in the Etruscan hills could wait. In the present was the glory of his first command. The British town was a sprawling huddle of reed-thatched roofs, with the squared, clean lines of the Roman Forum and Basilica looking oddly rootless in their midst. The road led straight through the town and up to the Praetorian gate of the fort. Here and there men turned to look at the cohort as it swung by, a look that was reserved rather than hostile. Dogs, lean pigs, and women spinning or grinding corn, the blue smoke of cooking fires, the savoury smell of evening meals mingled with wood smoke and the tang of horse droppings. All this Marcus had by now come to associate with all British towns, places where two worlds met without mingling. He looked about him, knowing that this place would be part of his life for the next year. "You brought clear skies with you," said Centurion Quintus Hilarion. "But you need not expect it to last." "As bad as that?" said Centurion Marcus Aquila. "Quite as bad as that. It rains, always. By the time you've served your year here, you'll have toadstools sprouting out of your ears, and not from the damp alone." "From what beside?" inquired Marcus with interest. Lack of company for one thing. I like my friends around me." He turned from the window. Well, I'm off to rub away the blue mould as soon as I've marched the troops back to Isca." "You're going on leave?" The other nodded. "Long leave. Lovely leave, among the fleshpots of Durinum. My father retired and settled there a few years ago. A good circus, pretty girls too. What shall you do when your leave falls due?" "I have an uncle at Caleva. "Though I've not yet met him," Marcus said. "Father and mother both dead?" inquired Hilarion with friendly interest. "Yes, my father went with the 9th Legion." "You mean when they disappeared?" "Yes." "So," said Hilarion. "And of course they did lose the Eagle." "Since not a man of the Legion came back, it is scarcely a matter for wonder that neither did the Eagle," Marcus flashed. "Surely not," agreed Hilarion amicably. It was several hours since Marcus had marched his cohort in. Dinner was over, and for the past hour he and Hilarion had been going through the office work of the frontier fort. Now the two of them were taking their ease. "I wonder," said Marcus, "what does one do here besides growing toadstools? Is there good hunting?" "Good enough. Boar, wolf, and deer. I'm wise to go alone, of course." Marcus nodded. "Have you any advice for me?" The other considered. "Yes, but it has nothing to do with the hunting. Druids." "Druids?" Marcus was surprised and puzzled. "But surely Suetonius Paulinus dealt with them once and for all 60 years ago." "As an organized priesthood may be, but they spring up still from time to time. When there's any sign of unrest among the tribes, you can wager your sandals there's a holy man at the bottom of it, preaching holy war." "Go on." Hilarion spoke slowly. "The frontier tribes are a wild lot, but even they have mostly come to think that we are not fiends of darkness, and they have enough sense to see that destroying the local garrison will only mean a stronger one with a heavier hand thereafter. But let one of their holy men lay hold of them, and they cease to think whether any good can come of their rising, cease to think at all. They're keeping faith with their gods by smoking out a nest of unbelievers, and with men in that state there is apt to be trouble. I am native-born," he added, as though in explanation. "That is how I come to have some understanding of these matters. My predecessor had a certain amount of trouble just before I took over, and the troublemaker slipped through his fingers." They went out together to the duty centurion, who stood outside with a flaring torch. The clashing Roman salute was exchanged, and they set out on their tour of the darkened fort. Marcus thought, "After tonight, it will be for me alone to see that all is well with the frontier of the empire." Next morning, after the formal takeover ceremony in the Forum, the old garrison marched out, and Marcus was alone with his first command. Chapter 2. Feathers in the Wind. Before many days had passed, Marcus had slipped so completely into the life of the frontier fort that it seemed as though he had never known any other. The plan of all Roman forts was much the same, and the pattern of life lived in them, so that knowing one meant knowing them all. But after a few days he began to know the individualities that made every camp different, and it was these differences that made him feel at home in Isca. In one corner of the officers' courtyard, some past commander, homesick for the warmth and colour of the south, had planted a rosebush in a great stone wine-jar. That rosebush gave Marcus a sense of continuance. It was a link between him and those who had been before him, here on the frontier, and the others who would come after. It took him a little while to settle down with his officers. The surgeon, a gentle soul. The quartermaster, a little red, angry man who had missed promotion and grown overfull of his own importance in consequence. And Lutorius, who commanded the fort's one squadron of Dacian horse, and was reserved to the point of sullenness. Marcus's 5 ranker centurions were all so much older and more experienced than he was. It was not easy, with less than a year with the Eagles behind him, to tell Centurion Paulus that he was over-fond of using his vine-staff on his men's backs, or make centurion Galba understand that the centurions of the 4th Gaulish cohort were not going to take bribes from their men for letting them off fatigues while he was in command. But he managed it somehow, and there was a better understanding.